to listen to our dad on the Cressman podcast.
With me on the podcast today, my longtime friend and longtime client, Brett Kissel. Now, Brett, you've had 3 number 1 singles, 2 platinum singles, 6 gold singles. You've amassed over 200 million global streams. And when I watch you on stage, I know I'm not alone in the understanding that I feel like you were born to do this. If it wasn't for music, what do you think a guy like you would be up to professionally these days?
Well, it's perfect that I'm a guest today and I'm coming at you from the cattle ranch where I grew up. And without question, I would be a farmer. I would be a rancher. I'd go chase cows. I don't know, tinker around with some machinery. I'd go build fences and pull calves in the spring. That's what I love to do. And I realized that that's maybe about all I probably could do if I wasn't on stage, because I don't have any formal education to anything else, but I got 10, 12, 15 years of farm education from my grandparents. So this is exactly what I'd be doing, is being here in this spot. I'm in my garage. Well, me and my grandpa's garage right now. So this is where I'd be and what I'd be doing.
I love it. Well, for everybody tuning in on YouTube, you'll be able to check this out. But for the people listening at home, listening at home on Apple or Google or Amazon, the reality is you have come from a long line of ranchers. Like how many years and how many generations has that ranch been in your family?
Well, it's been 110 years on my mom's side and 106 years on my grandpa's side. So both centennial ranches, and I'm not even sure if you knew this, but the 49th ranch to achieve centennial status in Alberta was the Wenjanowski Northview Ranch, where I currently am right now, this homestead. Now, to qualify for that Centennial Farm and Ranch Award, beautiful brass plaque and a bursary or whatever from the government, is you need to still actively be ranching. So there are a lot of people who still own land, but they don't actively farm, so they don't qualify. We were the 49th farm in our province to reach centennial status. Now, 4 years later, the 50th farm was my dad's side of the family. So the Kissel Ranch, the Hill and Valley Ranch, it got their centennial status in 2014. So my tattoo over my heart is the legal land description of both of those ranches. So country music, the rural way of life, and this like farm and ranch work ethic, it runs through my blood on both sides. Both genetics have come together in me and also in my brother. So I'm very proud of that stat.
But like most artists, you're significance driven. You're very effervescent. You love people. Do you feel like you would be able to check all those boxes if you were a rancher? Because really, you've got the attention of the cows and your family.
Yeah, well, that was the early days. I would practice a lot driving the tractor and sing and yodel and stuff like that. I am significance driven and I've always wanted to be in the spotlight. And from a time I was a little kid, there's video of me on VHS of standing on the coffee table and singing the national anthem, before Hockey Night in Canada. So I don't know how I would get that other than maybe just be the local guy playing the local circuit and playing weddings and rodeos and stuff. I loved that. And I know that you grew up in a small town. A lot of people in the city don't understand how that was just such a big thing. And local bands were quite popular and quite like small town famous, playing every event, playing all the great cover songs and throwing in a couple originals. That was me. So I'd figure out a way to still pepper in music for sure.
Yeah, Johnny Cash said something in his biography that really resonated with me at the time. And I'm going to paraphrase it because it's been a long time since I've read that book. But he basically said country music is a format that was inspired by a lifestyle. And now it's a art piece that inspires lifestyle. Like it's an interesting dynamic. It was born out of rural roots, and now it inspires city people to sort of try to reconnect with the ideals of that country music espouses. So it's interesting that you say that, and it's interesting that ties back to Johnny Cash, who you have an amazing story about too. And I think you should tell people that story. For anybody who doesn't know this, it's pretty incredible.
Well, I love the Men in Black. I always have. I always will. being here at this house right now, my grandparents' house, their record collection was vast, and we listened to Johnny Cash a lot. And there's no denying that his music was inspired by the hardships and the work and all of the challenges that he faced growing up on a dirt poor farm in Dyess, Arkansas. Now, as he became the global superstar that he became, of course, his music, reached up here in Canada. And I, as a kid, listened to a lot of Johnny Cash, and I didn't realize at the time, Jim, that his music was old. I thought it was current because that's what I heard all the time. So I would learn that when I got my first guitar, because actually Johnny Cash music was easy to play. So when I recorded my first cassette, my very first recording, it was full of Johnny Cash music. But to go a part of the story, if you rewind a couple months before I started recording, June Carter passed away in May of 2003. I'm 12 years old, and I felt so sad for him because the news obviously covered, that tragic story and how heartbroken he was and how meant for each other Johnny and June were.
Yeah, true
So
soulmates.
really, absolutely. And when I wrote him a letter to the Johnny Cash fan club on the back of one of my Meme on Grandpa's records, the Johnny Cash fan club, Hendersonville, Tennessee, I write this letter to him. And I remember, it's interesting, my mom told me, I don't know if that's going to reach him. What are you doing? Do you actually think this is going to get to Johnny Cash? Because she was a realist. Whereas my dad was the one who drove me to the post office, said, well, you never know, son. So we put it in the mail. In the meantime, now I record my first cassette, as I was telling you about, full of Johnny Cash music. I recorded it locally. And now it's Friday, September the 12th. The cassette's made, the recording is done, and I am ready to put out this cassette into the world and have an album release party in Glendon, Alberta, population 300 people. And Friday, September 12th, my mom woke me up in the morning and said, I've got good news, but I've also got sad news. And I said, what's the good news? She said, the good news is your concert sold out. And to put it in perspective, 600 tickets were sold in a 300-person village for my album release. And I'd already been playing, obviously, a bunch, as a kid. So I released this album. And now my mom says, but the sad news is that Johnny Cash passed away this morning. And I remember crying and crying and crying. He was my hero. Well, my dad comes to the album release party a couple hours before. He was working, he was a school teacher, and he brought a stack of mail. In this stack of mail was cards from cousins and aunts and uncles. Congratulations on your event tonight. And also a big yellow envelope with shaky handwriting that was addressed to me and our farm address. I opened it up, and it was an 8x10 signed by Johnny Cash. To Brett, Jesus first, Johnny Cash. And I received that, Jim, on the day that he died, Friday, September the 12th, 2003. It's still my most prized possession.
How serendipitous.
Exactly. Like, I've always felt, Jim, that Johnny has had his hands on my shoulders guiding me to a degree ever since. And I'm so grateful to have that, but to know that I received it on that day. You can't write that stuff.
No. No, it's there's so much to delve into from that story, but one of the things that I want to really reiterate to the audience and people tuning in is how entrepreneurial you were from an early age, and how your parents both really supported you to get out there and put your art first and foremost, develop essentially a classic country show that you could sell tickets to. And one of the reasons I really wanted to get into business with you when I met you when you were 12 years old is, first off, you were just incredibly effervescent. And I was just taken by your personality. And I remember saying to you, if you can sing, you're going to be a fucking superstar. But on top of that, I also loved how business savvy you were and how willing you were to dig in and do the work yourself. And, when you're evaluating artists, especially if you're in the business like I am, and you want to work with artists decade by decade, not just month by month or year by year, you really want to consider what kind of a business partner they would be. And with you, I felt like, man, this is a guy who's not afraid of the heavy lifting. And you were working very hard at an early age to establish a reputation as an entertainer.
Well, and I love to work, and I would always watch the guys who did great on stage and put on great shows. That was a big thing for me because I didn't have my own songs. I had to do covers. So I had to figure out banter in between songs. I had to figure out how best to hold an audience. If I had two songs in an opening slot, or if I had a half an hour, or if I had my own show for 1 hour, how was I going to keep the attention of the audience? That was a big thing as far as entertainment is concerned. But the entrepreneurial business side of things, some of it happened by accident, some of it happened by true hard work, some of it happened by luck, some of it happened because my brain was just wired that way. But I realized that if I booked my own show, I could make more money. I realized by doing simple math, if I booked that community hall in Stettler, I knew that the rent on that hall was $300. And I knew that if I sold, well, capacity was 200 tickets. So I knew if I sold 200 tickets at $20 a ticket, um, that's a $4,000 gross. And I realized if I pay each of my band members, 250 bucks times two band members, a little three-piece show, I'm into it for $500. My fuel was X, my vehicle was X. So I'm 14 years old, and figuring out how to sell out these places. Now, how do you
You're
sell
clearing two to $3,000 after your expenses.
as a 13 or 14-year-old? And honestly, that didn't really, I mean, the support came from my parents, but it was just simple math to me. And I knew that I would have to go around and, put up put up posters at the co-op, and I'd have to put up posters at the liquor store. And I knew that everybody's going to buy booze, so I would ask if I could put up a poster at the liquor store. I knew that if I partnered with the Egg Society, called it a fundraiser, and said maybe we could raise, 500 bucks, and maybe they would hire me, and we'd even do a split. So I would get money up front to pay my expenses, and then we could split the profits at the end. I don't know how I knew this stuff as a 14, 15, 16-year-old, but I loved it. And once you do it once and you do it successfully, you realize you've now played in Stettler. Let's go play in Cold Lake. Let's go play in Brooks. Let's go play in Medicine Hat. Let's play in Big Valley. Let's play Glendon. Let's play Elk Point. Let's play Rocky Mountain House. And then, well, wow, there's a whole world out there. Let's go do this in Saskatchewan. Let's partner with the radio station. So all of these things built, and I was as passionate about promoting the show as I was about doing the show. And I thought I could do a better show if I had a sold out crowd. And the best part about it is when you sell out one, that was a Saturday. Let's do another one on a Friday night because now there's demand for the show. Let's put on another one. Let's double your profits. So I remember as as a 17-year-old in grade 12, my manager, Dr. Bob Stedward, we looked at the books at the end of the year and we realized we grossed $250,000. $250,000. I made more money as a 17-year-old than both my mom and my dad's salaries as teachers put together. And that gave me confidence and that gave me power to know that if I was lucky enough to get an agency deal with you, who you were the guy I wanted, you knew that I knew the game. I knew that you knew the game. So we could work together. And I also had this binder, a legitimate binder of contacts at every egg society or every rodeo in the province. And when you book it yourself, you know how the game is played. And so I loved the business of it as much as I loved being on stage, and I still do.
This is why I don't think you would have been a farmer. I think you would have ended up in the entertainment business or in marketing or in some domain or realm that puts you out there to sell a product. And in this case, of course, that product being you. But I love the fact that you had that entrepreneurial drive from that early age. And it was so exciting for me to get a chance to work with you and grow that into what you have now. Now, you've talked a lot about success and momentum. Talk about the failures because there must have been some that you navigated in the early days. And were there times where you thought about giving it up? Because I think a lot of young artists encounter that, sometimes very early on at various times in their career.
Giving up was something that I never wanted to do, and giving up was something that I'm grateful I've never had to do. but I know that there's different degrees of success. And there were times where I was going to give up on that particular dream associated with the music business. So giving up, packing up, ending entirely was not in the cards and still will not happen. Some way, somehow, I will still be involved in the entertainment business, knowing what I know now and knowing what I'm capable of. But in the early days, some of the struggles I had was about the American market and about giving up certain things that I'm used to and I've grown accustomed to in order to create a national name for myself and a national brand for my career. That was extremely difficult to have 2 weekends in front of me. July 1st in my hometown, knowing I could maybe make $5,000 because I'm the local guy, or knowing it's actually better for my career to play in Prince Edward Island where nobody knows me and be the first act on the bill for $500 and wind up losing $5,000, but do it for the greater good of my career and my brand and my perception. That has always been a difficult decision, and I'm still faced with that today. If I could do an event in Canada or do an event in Ohio, but it's better for me to go and build a fan base in the States at this time instead of playing Calgary yet again. So the failures that I kind of took head on. A lot of it had to do with financing, and a lot of it had to do with realizing that there are a lot of challenges ahead, and I might not be able to pay my bills unless I take this gig or unless I really figure out something. And I overspent. I made a lot of mistakes in the early days, thinking that just because my books said that I made $250,000 doesn't mean that I saved $250,000. I might have only saved 50, but I have to invest 50 in the next record. So actually, I'm broke. Well, I didn't realize that. So all of my real big challenges had to do with finances, and to a degree, they still have to do with finances right now.
Yeah, the problems are the problems, just the scale of them change. And I really like the fact that you talked about growing your career from local to provincial to national. And now we're at this place with you where it's a really interesting crossroads where we've got to go international. And you're right. Not only is there the discrepancy in money between what you're going to get paid to play in Ohio versus Edmonton, but there's a discrepancy in where you'd be on the bill, how you're treated by the promoters, because in the United States, you're a baby act. Up here, you're a star. How do you navigate that with your ego?
Well, I've had to do a lot of soul searching. And if you'd have asked me this question a couple of years ago, I would have had a much different answer. Not that I exactly know what that would have been, but I think I would have been a lot more egocentric. I would have been a lot more concerned about my perception. Whereas now I've done a full 180 in my head and in my heart to understand that I see this as a real gift. If I get the opportunity to go and play in the United States, I'm treated as a rookie because I am a rookie. But make no mistake, give me a microphone and a stage, and I'll be able to whip that crowd up. So I can't wait. Every time I step on the stage and I open for somebody who actually would open for me in Canada, I look forward to those opportunities, not in a cocky way, but in a way of understanding my true value and having self-confidence, knowing that I can go into any situation because nothing's new to me anymore. I can draw on that experience from when I was 17 or when I was 27, and now that I'm 30, and I know that I can do a great job for the crowd and wow them, which is my job as an entertainer. So I feel I've been given a gift to get to do this all over again. A lot of guys in the NHL in hockey who do very, very well in junior or in different leagues like the Swedish Elite League or the KHL in Russia come to the NHL, the biggest league in the world, and think that they're automatically owed a top line place and a Stanley Cup at the end of the year. I kind of thought that in my 20s. I did, to be honest. And now I feel I'm so excited that I just get to play in the game and I'm going to earn my way up there and do the very best that I can and understand that some of these things are actually beyond my control. I'll just control what I can and give it all I got. I know that's cliche, but I'm very excited for this new opportunity.
Yeah, and I think, listen, I think you got to cut yourself some slack because you get conditioned to the adulation you receive, right? And then once you have a reality check by going into a new market and starting from the bottom, it's very hard for anybody to do that. Like you and I have had these conversations privately many times where I've gone, hey, listen, I'm established, like I empathize with you. I'm established in Canada in the industry. If I had to start over somewhere else and eat shit for the first 5, 7, 10 years, I'm not sure I would have the stomach to do it. And I certainly don't blame you if you don't. Like I get it. But there is something to be said that makes you want to get out of bed when you feel like you got something to prove.
Very much so. And I have not really had the chip on my shoulder because growing up as a kid, especially here in rural Alberta, I had so much support from family, from friends, and from communities across our province that I felt like I was playing with house money. I couldn't lose. I just had this overwhelming support. Whereas now in America, so many people don't know me and so many people don't care. And a lot of people at radio or promoters kind of don't give a shit because if it's not going to be me doing that gig for $1,500, it's going to be somebody else. So take it or leave it. Now that chip on my shoulder actually is just this extra tool I feel like I've got in my toolkit, or this extra arrow that I've got in my weaponry that I can use and draw on that I've never really had before. Or now all of the going back to the failures, all of the times I've been turned down in Nashville. And I still, to a degree, don't get why. Some of it is so weird in the sense of, well, look at Warner or Big Machine. Both of them brought up one of the big reasons why it was going to be a little bit weird to have me on their label was they had just as the time I was about to, hopefully get signed by either Warner or Big Machine, they had both signed Brett Young and Brett Eldridge. And how do I differentiate? I'm thinking to myself, what a cop out. Like there were Tracy Bird and Tracy Lawrence. There's Chris Jansen, Chris Young. There's Chris Lane. But the name had something to do with it. So I could be jaded and frustrated. And of course, I'm expressing a little bit of frustration, but I feel that chip on my shoulder makes me actually want to work harder and now figure out what it is I need to do to navigate through these waters, to come out on the other side and hopefully be a much bigger star in the United States, than beyond my own wildest dreams. The power is in my hands now.
It's such a strange business we work in where people want to be disingenuous and lie to you rather than give you the truth, and they think they're doing you a favor. But if they actually gave you the real reasons why they don't want to work with you at this particular time, it would arm you with the ability to go back, recalibrate, reconfigure, and come back to them with a new plan. Nothing pisses me off more than that. I just think it's incumbent upon industry professionals to make sure you're honest with an artist about why you don't see a fit at this particular time, right? And things can change. You and I spoke for 6 years before we ended up signing you at Invictus because I kept saying the same thing. Hey, buddy, every time I have Emerson Drive, George Canyon, Charlie Major in your region of the country, I would love you to come open the show. But I don't know what I can do for you nationally at this point. And then, of course, he got signed with Warner, and I was like, okay, now I can do something,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's frustrating when you recognize that, I'm sure, as a professional, and you're like, just give me the real reason, man.
Yeah, the real reason is something that I've still been searching for. And it's such a unique business and a frustrating business at times because, unlike everything else, I believe, unless I'm super naive, which I don't think I am with what I'm about to say, if you're in sports, if you are a boxer and you just keep knocking out your opponent, you're going to rise. You're going to rise to the top. And if you get with, some really good promoters and then you get with bigger guys, better competition, you knock them out too, before you know it, you're going to have a belt around your waist and you're going to be a champion. End of story.
Right.
I
Right.
got
But
that.
you make a really good point in that analogy about the quality of your opposition. Now, here's one thing that I think hurts Canadian artists when they try to get signed in the US, and I want to get your take on this because We, of course, have the Canadian content CRTC regulation of 35% of all radio stations must play, or all radio stations must play 35% Canadian content. That's mandated. They want to keep their licensing. That's the way it's got to be. I think that we have an industry today because of that ruling. And I think it's really important that that ruling exists because it fosters opportunity and it really gave us an industry here in Canada. On the flip side, though, internationally, a lot of people don't take Canadians seriously, or they go, well, of course your song went number one, or of course it went platinum, because the stations up there are mandated to play you. And there's this perception that we're sort of fostered along in almost like an arts welfare program, and that we're not necessarily going to be able to hack it in the real world, which is what they consider the United States and the American market. And it is the biggest market in the world, so they're not wrong on that front. But it's this weird dynamic we have where you need the Canadian content concept to establish a business, but it can inhibit opportunities as you go stateside.
So there's a lot to unpack there. And my opinion on that whole matter is this: you just have to rely on the merit of the song and the artist. What is the artist's brand, and what can the artist actually do that is internationally, that can be internationally recognized? So that's where it's at. I mean, Shania Twain broke the mold. Of course, she kind of really, well, a lot of Canadians say she started in Canada, went to America, but I mean, here's the thing about Shania. She was an incredible entertainer, and she had incredible songs that were incredibly produced. And it was better in the 90s and the 2000s than everybody else. It didn't matter where she was from, she was just better. So the merit of the artist and the brand and that entire package made sense. There are a number of Canadian artists that, without question, wouldn't cut it if you put up the A-level Canadian against the A-level American, or the B-level Canadian against the B-level American. There is a stark difference. At the same time, there are several A-level Canadians that I believe could entertain, write, and perform circles around some of what are called the A-listers in America. Why they're not given that shot? Sometimes it's the choice of the Canadian who just simply doesn't want to go and eat shit and just try again from the beginning in the United States. But you just have to say that it's the merit of the song and of the artist. The real mystery is when you and I know there is that particular artist or that particular group or that particular female artist who's got it all, and you just don't know why they haven't broke internationally. There's got to be something inside that we don't know about, or in the inner circle that we don't know about, that is keeping that artist from achieving that international success. But when you're talking about CRTC and everything like that, don't get me wrong, it's great for Canada. It also, on the flip side, just propels up some of the, I don't want to say, but it's tough to say, but there are sometimes mediocre songs that just go there, and it's just because they got to get played. We all know that. We hear that in America too. So
although that is happening less and less as the landscape becomes more competitive in Canada. I think that was a real concern in the late 90s and early 2000s. But now the competition is there. Like, you got to bring your A game if you want to be part of that 35% Canadian content on Canadian radio. You got to bring your A game now. Like, it's a totally different business than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, agreed. So totally fair that there is a big difference in Canadian country music. Maybe it's because a lot of us are spending more time in Nashville. Maybe it's because we've got access to those songwriters. Maybe it's because we're producing our records there. Or maybe it's just because Pro Tools, for example, whether you're in Toronto or Calgary or Saskatoon or LA, New York, or Nashville, doesn't really matter. You can find good songs and get a good
It's leveled the playing field. You don't need to be in a Nashville studio to put out a great record. No, I agree. And I do think that in Nashville particularly, but in the United States overall, there's a subjective perception of Canadian artists based on the fact that we have some policies in place to give Canadian artists an opportunity. But as you mentioned, and Shania is a great example, all of that subjective perception and interpretation can be overcome with overwhelming stats. And I know that's been a big component of our conversations of breaking you internationally. It's like once the stats become undeniable, then it moves from a subjective conversation and a gut feel to an objective conversation that's data driven. And it's like, hey, whether or not you get this artist, they're streaming 100 million, if they're streaming 50 to 100 million streams per single, if they're checking all these boxes, American labels are going to be interested in them. And I think for you, that's probably the next step for us is how do we get into that echelon so that our stats are equatable with anyone they would be interested in or surpassing anyone they would be interested in who's a domestic American act.
You're absolutely right. Stats don't lie. And then again, give a particular artist or give me a stage, give me a microphone and a guitar, and just wind me up like the Energizer Buddy, and I'm gonna go. So that's something that I hope I get that opportunity. And I'm wearing a Garth Brooks sweater. I was able to do that with with him. I've been able to do that with Brad Paisley, and I think our time is coming. I'm now a big believer in the universe and understanding that things are going to happen when they're meant to happen. So before I was chasing and hitting my head up against the wall, and I feel that over the last 2 years I care more about caring less, if that makes any sense, and being more authentic and not trying to figure out, oh, Dan and Shay just had a song like that, I should write something like that because clearly that's what a label wants. I'm just going to be myself now and really stop chasing, not stop working, but stop chasing.
I think that's brilliant, and I think it speaks to the momentum that you've established. The last record had 2 number 1s. The only single on it that didn't go number 1 went platinum. And then you ended up with the most added single at Canadian country music of all time with Make a Life, Not a Living. How hard is it? I have a lot of young artists who tune into this podcast. How hard is it to establish momentum? And then once you have it, is it easier to maintain it or more difficult?
Oh, that's momentum is maybe the second most important thing. You need a hit song, but then once you've got that, you need to keep the momentum. So keeping it is actually harder than getting it. And for me, I think on a regular basis about how to keep momentum, how to keep things going. When's the right time to announce this or announce that or do this or do that? There are different areas of momentum and different groupings of it. For me as a national artist, there's much different momentum here than the artist who's trying to get a foothold in the business. But if you're always focused on momentum, I believe you're always focused on the right thing. So for the new artists out there, whatever momentum means to you and however you can do it locally or in your own city or how you can do to get a little bit of national success, if you get a national story, it's your job to keep that momentum and keep the pedal to the metal and try to figure out the next opportunity to get a national story or a national look. And so for us, we're getting some international looks in Billboard or in Rolling Stone Country or here and there. How do we keep that going? Because the big failure is getting it once and never getting it again.
Yeah, I like to use the analogy of surfing. I know you've been to Hawaii. I don't know if you've done much surfing, but it's really hard to get up on the board. Once you're on the board and you've caught a wave, it's not exactly easy to stay up, but it might be easier than getting up in the first place, right? So there is something to be said for riding a wave of momentum, and you might get some doors opened and some opportunities that you may not get if you were just starting out, because people are like, well, this person has proven themselves with a couple of hit songs or a couple of massive shows in the marketplace. But maintaining it, man, that is the secret, because that's how you establish an imprint in the consciousness of the fans. You start to become a household name. You start to become a celebrity. You start to become, and by the way, I want to talk a little bit about that. When did you really notice that you hit a level of celebrity in Canada? Because for years, people, they might get played on the radio, but they struggle in public with anonymity. And for you, I mean, I've been with you when we're out for dinner and people are approaching for autographs. And when did that start to really happen for you?
You know what? It was about 4 or 5 years ago, when the momentum that we had built across Canada, and the amount of effort that we focused in Toronto, and knowing that all of the national shows are out of there, from Strombo to everything CBC, everything CTV, Global, City TV, all the networks, sports. About 5 or 6 years ago, Cecilia and I, we were walking in the Eaton Center, and I got stopped for a picture. I thought that was really cool, and I was honored by it. And I judged a book by its cover. It was a guy and a girl wearing plaid and blue jeans and a ball cap, almost identical to how I'm dressed right now. They're from Alberta,
Yeah,
or they're
the
country
country
music.
fan uniform.
And then it was about 10 minutes later, I'm in Zara, and I was approached by um, an ethnic family with a different background, and they were Filipino. And they saw me play in Toronto at CNE. And it was a, oh my God, that's Brett Kissel. And then they really freaked out. And then they kind of created this buzz, and a bunch of people around from different cultural backgrounds. That was key to me, because country music in general, look at how I'm dressed. I'm not going to stereotype the listener, because it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, you can love and appreciate country music. But when this multicultural thing happened and embarked on Cecilia and I for 30 minutes in a Zara, uh, that was crazy to me. And that's when I knew that maybe I had crossed over the genre of just country music, and maybe had been on enough, national telecasts, that people from different walks of life, or urban people, were like, hey, we're fans of yours. That was really cool to me. And I do get stopped in Toronto at any restaurant or whatever as often, because I'll always put my name down, like for a reservation, and I'll get stopped in Toronto as often as I will in Edmonton and Calgary, which is pretty crazy.
It's really an acid test for celebrity. I've preached it to my clients for years where I'm like, hey, listen, the first step is get recognized in your hometown, right? Like if you're walking down the street in your hometown, people are asking you for autographs or pictures. That's one thing. And then when you start getting stopped in major Canadian cities, Vancouver, Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, people are pulling you aside, Montreal, obviously, that's a big deal. The next level is you can't walk down the street in LA or Nashville without people stopping you, right? And that's the one that we're striving for. But it's interesting that there's this correlation between recognition and success in your career, because there are artists out there who I often point to the band Collective Soul, big rock band from the early 2000s, mid and late 90s. Nobody knows any of those guys, but they've sold over 100 million records, right? So it's interesting when you build celebrity, how sometimes that can be built in the dark, but more often than not, especially these days with social media, you are building it in the limelight. Now, I know you're a very extroverted individual. I know you like people. Is there ever a part of that that's somewhat uncomfortable for you, where you're
It
getting recognized, stopped in the street? Like, is there a part of that sometimes where you're like, okay, I've had enough?
Well, it's interesting because I love to share on social media my real life. And I mean, you've known me for 15, 16. Well, you've known me for 20 years, since I was 10 years old. So you know that everything I put on social media is just completely accurate, just not filtered, doctored, no BS. That's who I am. Now, the challenge though with doing that is that my wife and my kids are they're recognized on a regular basis, especially locally here in Alberta. It's not necessarily a big deal. I don't really have any issues with security or any fear about that. But where it does get a little bit frustrating is in settings with dinner, or in settings where I always like to spend time with my fans. I really do. But I also like to be normal. So if I go out to a restaurant and maybe because I've got toddlers, maybe they're acting up a little bit and maybe I need to, discipline a little bit and I really need to focus on my kid, or Leo, my boy, just decides, hey, I'm at a restaurant. I'm just going to go and talk to every single table out there and just go visit. So I got to wrangle them in. And then by the time I do that, they recognize it's me. And then it just gets chaotic. So Cecilia and I, now are just at the point where if we're going to go out, we do book a private room so that we know we can just have that private time together or that private time with our friends. Because if I'm going to have dinner with you, Jim, and Christy, or Louie and Val, or any of my buddies, I'm there for them and they're there for me. So if I'm going to spend time with fans, again, I don't mind it at all. And I'm very grateful for it. But you know what? If I'm spending a minute with 20 people, that's 20 minutes gone out of a 60-minute dinner. A third of it is gone. So I'm not complaining. I swear to you, I'm not. But I have to be very, very conscious of my time and the people that I'm around. So we just
No,
figure it out.
listen, I get it. It's one of those things that people don't like to talk about because everybody's in this business to achieve some level of fame, right? And then once they have it, it depends on how they frame it, as to whether or not they enjoy it or hate it. Uh, Speaking of your beautiful family, have all your kids gotten your level of extroversion in their personalities?
I think to a degree, yes. Aria, right in the middle, that we call her the glue of the family. She is so sensitive and energetically just knows who in the room actually needs the hug, who in the room actually needs to talk to. So she's the one that, of course, has some what's the word? She is effervescent if she gets to know you, and then all of a sudden she's joking and loving and laughing and playing little tricks and stuff like that. From the get go, though, Mila, our oldest, and Leo, our youngest, they are the two that from the beginning are just little hams, little entertainers, little performers. And Mila, because she's older and has a very good vocabulary for a 5-year-old, is playing with 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds. And you realize as I watch from afar, these 10-year-olds are playing the game that Mila wants, and she's the 5-year-old leading the 10-year-olds about what's going on. I'm pretty proud about that. She's
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, that kid could be prime minister one day. Like she is so charismatic and so comfortable around adults, and it's a beautiful thing to see. So well done on that front, my friend. You've raised an amazing family.
Cecilia gets. I have to say she just gets all
You
the
and
credit.
Cece. Yeah,
She,
absolutely.
I mean,
How
Phil,
how
thank
have
you.
things yeah, and how have things changed for you guys since the little ones have come along? I mean, obviously, you've got this career with a ton of momentum. We're not touring right now because of this whole COVID shutdown, and we can talk about that later. But how have things changed in the dynamic of your household and as it pertains to your career by adding kids to the mix?
Well, Cecilia and I, we love each other more. We really do because we have these three incredible heartbeats that we take care of together, that we wanted together, that we created together. So our love has grown for each other leaps and bounds. And we're very, very grateful to be co parenting together. Because of that, I think that we go to bed at night with a lot of gratitude and wake up with a lot of gratitude. Now, it's that 12 hours from 7 to 7 or 6:30 to 7:30, those 13 hours when our kids are awake, chaos ensues and our patience runs thin. And my fuse, just how I grew up and genetically, Cecilia's got a long fuse that is a country mile long. Sometimes
She's so
mine,
patient.
and for me, I'm thinking to myself, how do you do this? Which again, I have great respect for her. So what happens in that 12 hours during the day while the sun is up? Things can get a little crazy. But how things are at nighttime, especially when our kids go to bed, we don't go to bed angry, and we go to bed literally looking at each other saying, "Oh my God, I love my kids. I love our kids," and we talk about something great. So I don't know, Jim. We're very blessed. We've got a really special perspective on parenting, understanding that it's the greatest gift in the world.
How has Cecilia inspired you to be an even better man?
Uh, in every single possible way. Not in this particular way, not in that particular way, not just here, not just there. Every single fucking way. End of story. I'm more, I learned what integrity is. I learned what honesty is. I learned what the truth really is. I can stand up for myself. I also know when to just not fight that battle. I know what real love is. I know how to fight for things. I know I write better songs because of her. I entertain better because of her. Sometimes I would go for a cheap joke, but I know that's not the right thing to do. Sometimes I don't know. It's just, we need 5 podcasts to talk about just one particular thing about how CC's made me better. There's not enough time in the day. I'm going to die 100 years old and I still don't have enough time.
I think I could sum it up from what I've seen observationally as an outsider looking in. I can sum it up a lot with one word, and that is grounding. She's a grounding force in your life. You know, she reminds you of the things that are important. She helps you prioritize. And yeah, I just think like it is so critical to have a great partner in this business. And my heart bleeds for the people who have aspirations and dreams to be stars in this business, but they're not saddled with somebody who supports those aspirations and dreams. And it's so nice to see that CC not only supports you, but gives you some really great guidance along the way.
Oh, she really does, and obviously, I'm very grateful for that, and I make no, what is the saying? No, like, no qualms about it. Like, seriously, if something went awry with her and I don't wanna write the story, but the reality is that I just wouldn't be the same person, artist, entertainer in any way, shape, or form. She she is the reason. End of story.
So one thing people often say about you to me is they go, "He can't be that nice. He can't be that considerate." I have had that conversation more times than I care to have it, honestly. And I will tell people, like, listen, Brett is one of the most thoughtful, considerate, kind, motivating, encouraging forces I have ever met. It's why I value our friendship so much. But it's not just me. I mean, whether it's radio, fans, I mean, you remember people's names, the names of their children, their pets, like you're always so deeply engaged with the people that you interact with and the people that you value. And I think it was a big surprise for a lot of fans and a lot of people in the industry when, you know, at times you've had some contentious back and forths. You know, I think it's not an elephant in the room, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the public um, battle that you had with Dallas Smith at one point,
Yeah.
right? And I think for a lot of people that was a shock because it's like, well, Brett's the nicest guy in the industry. How could he have a battle with somebody? But looking back on that now, and it's been a few years, especially as you've matured as a man, as a father, as a husband, as an artist, is there anything you would have done differently, or did you feel like in that moment you did what you needed to do?
Well, there's a couple different things with the Dallas situation. In particular, if I could go back to what 2017, um, I I felt that it just wasn't my place to interject in the tweet, and because of that, it started a war. Now, the fact that it started a battle is frustrating alone. If you look at my comments and his comments, it was the first time. Now social media, this happens all the time, and I understand the game of social media now and how a lot of these people, Bobby 123 or Sally 545, how they just grab onto something and something goes viral. So the real choice that I didn't make was the choice to just not even get involved. Don't say a thing anyway, because what's the point? So that's the big lesson here. The other thing that I've learned is that I don't need to like everybody, and everybody doesn't need to like me either. Becoming a man is understanding who your people are. And there's no denying Dallas is still not my person. It's not just, he's just not my kind of guy. And I know that I'm not his kind of guy. And the thing about it is that that's not a negative. That's just reality. But I'll
Yeah,
tell
you
you
can
what I
peacefully coexist with people that you're not necessarily going to hang out with all the time.
Absolutely. You look at the National Hockey League, there's, a roster of 24 people times 31 teams. A lot of these guys don't need to like each other, but you have respect for how they play the game. So for me, I've got a very high level of respect for the performer that Dallas is and the history that he's made in our business and the stats that he's achieved. You can't take that away from him. And everybody in the business, for the most part, like all fans in Canadian country music, love the guy. So it's great. Not my place to say. And there's no denying if you scroll through my phone, I've got a couple of his songs. He's got some great songs. But you know what? There are some things that he and I just don't see eye to eye on. And just because our business is small doesn't mean that we need to be buddies. The reality that I learned in 2017 was I just didn't need to bark up that tree because it just created a shitstorm that totally wasn't intended. And I think he could probably say the same thing. But whether or not he does, don't know. And I don't care. So, as far as I'm concerned with him, we'll be on the same award show. We'll be on the same festivals. He's going to put on his 75-minute show. So am I. And there's no competition because we couldn't be more different.
Right. Yeah, I think everything you expressed there is very wise and very honest. There is this weird dynamic in social media whereby people want to play to the audience, right? Especially if there's a point of contention, right? It's like it's so many times if you and I have a disagreement, for example, and we handle it, I'm pretty old school. I like to handle things face to face or on the phone or um, I just think it's a better way to get to the truth and get to the crux of the matter. If there's an audience watching, then there's this natural human desire to want to save face and to not only make your point, but to win by making the other person lose. Right. And a lot of times it's really hard to achieve peace in that space.
Yeah, it is very difficult in social media. It's a very difficult thing in this day and age because sometimes, even if you make a choice to be this guy over here and literally say, I love roses, everybody who loves daisies automatically assumes that you hate them. No, 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 no. I just said I like roses. You look at it with Trump and Biden, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals, NDP. It is so frustrating to coexist in this world right now when there is so much separation. So, based on that, our industry is so small that as you circle back to what I went through in 2017 with Dallas, it just was such an energy suck, I think, for me. And because of that, you know what? I can't say that I regret it because I'm really grateful of the lessons that I learned. And I realized that this is just a fight that I probably never want to have again whatsoever. But at the same time, you know what? It is what it is. It happened. It's 2021 now, completely over it. And I think you and I are this is maybe the only time publicly I've spoken about it since 2017 because who cares? The
Right.
challenge, the era that we're living in right now, and how to really skate around things or walk on eggshells on social media when there are landmines waiting around every corner that you don't even realize are there. Case in point, I wasn't overly aware of the pronouns that um, people are posting on Instagram right
Right.
now. He, him would be my pronoun. So when I did an interview recently, they asked what pronoun I wanted to be, what pronoun I would like to be used. And I said, I don't know what you mean. So, well, what do you mean you don't know what I mean? I said, like, what do you mean? Like, what pronoun? Explain to me. And they explained the entire thing. And I felt as though I'd been living under a rock because apparently it's been a really big thing. Well, I mean, I don't know. Is it because I live in the country? Is it because I don't, that doesn't matter to me? But by saying it doesn't matter, does that mean that I don't care about this whole thing? It exploded in me before the interview even started because I didn't know what it even meant. And that I just wish people understood that can happen. And there's no
Yeah,
ill
it's
will.
it's hard to keep up with the new rules in the church of woke, and it I get frustrated with that too. Like I take a look at a situation like the pronouns and I go, I mean, you know what my pronouns are. Um, obviously you can, and listen, I'm not the type of person that if you referred to me out of context on a pronoun, I probably wouldn't get too upset with you. I might just correct you, if you called me a she, but I don't think anybody's going to do that most of the time. Right.
Yeah.
And I just think sometimes these movements become trendy and they get hijacked by people who want to make them about them. Right. And there's something really off-putting to me about that. It's like there are people out there who struggle with self-identity. They struggle with defining who they are, and they've struggled with it their whole fucking life. And those people are not to be lumped in with the rest of us who haven't, just because you want to show everybody how fucking virtuous you are. So I get a little frustrated with that. It's like, listen, look at me. You know what my pronouns are. There's no question about that. And, if you want me to call you something, I got no problem with it. Right? Just let me know up front and don't trick me into it and make me feel like I've attacked it, offended, or affronted you if I didn't know about your proclivity for a certain pronoun up front, right? Let's give it to me up front. Tell me what you want to be called. I don't give a shit. I don't take any of this personally. Whatever you want to be is fine by me.
I'll tell you what triggers me on a grand scale. The fact that even us having this conversation as two friends and two men back and forth, this is a public conversation. But as you're saying these things, as I'm bringing up the example that I shared, the back of my mind is saying, "Did you say something wrong? Did
Yeah,
you do
totally.
something that be canceled for that is completely an accident that
Innocuous.
oblivious to?" And that's what triggers me, is that I believe that I'm trying to be as authentic as I possibly can be. I'm actually trying to stay in my lane now more than ever, be who I am, and kind of put my blinders on to what's going on, to just say, you do you, I'll do me. If you being you affects me being me, then there's an issue. Or if me being me affects you being you, there's an issue. But as of now, I will be who I am, you be whoever you want to be, end of story. But the fact that maybe I'm not hopping on the train, and I have to comment and compliment Tyrone Edwards, my very good friend, who said, my trauma as a black man is not your trend. So
Yes.
that to me,
Yes.
wonderful thing for me to cling to say, I will support you as a friend. I will ask you in private how I can best support you. And if the answer is there's nothing you can do, this is just an issue that I'm dealing with or something that I'm going to get through on my own in my own way, great. But a lot of people in a lot of my friend group, all of a sudden, just because this is going on in the world, are just going to make this big proclamation, when I think to myself, what is the real reason you're doing it for? Is that person or that group's trauma now your trend? That is the thing that I've now seen more and more and more, which is why I don't want to comment about it. I put my blinders on. I just stay in my lane. I retreat to the farm. I just go write my country songs and live my life and stay in my lane, because you know what? In 2021, there are more and more landmines in the ditch than I ever thought was possible. Some of these landmines, though, are good, because some of these people that actually swerve all over the road kind of deserve to get blasted. I'm not going to name names, but I'm saying that if you stay in your lane, no trouble's going to find you. Just don't be a bad person.
I think that's amazing advice, and I couldn't agree more. I think that you should never go out of your way to hurt somebody's feelings, right? Like when we talk about this desire for people to self-identify as something different than the package that might be presented to the world. If you're a 35-year-old biological male and you want me to call you Susie, I got no problem with that.
No
But
problem.
if you're a 35-year-old male who identifies as a 70-year-old man and now you want to apply for pension, well, then it gets weird. right? Or if you identify as a 6-year-old girl and now you want to go to grade 1 alongside my kids, well, then it gets weird, right? And I think a lot of people agree with that privately, which again goes back to my point about this strange dynamic in social media where people feel the need to save face and virtue signal. And it's like, if we have a private conversation, you agree with me, but publicly you need to present this version of yourself that isn't authenticated in order to win over the praises of people that you probably, would turn on you in a fucking second. Let's start there. But probably that you don't actually interact with that much and don't care about. So yeah, it's created a very strange economy, and I'm sitting back and watching it, but I really enjoy podcasts because I think it gives us a chance to discuss these things, and I think they're important to be discussed because I think there are a lot of people who, not unlike you and I, are sitting there going like, listen, I'm not trying to hurt anybody or offend anybody, but I don't know what the fucking rules are because they change every day. And I don't want to try and sum it up in a Facebook status. I'd rather have a conversation about it. And in that conversation, understand that if I'm wrong, I'm just going to learn, right? That's fine by me. And, you know, but I don't want to be attacked for the process of learning because I don't think that's fair to anybody. And it doesn't ingratiate anyone towards the end goal, which is to draw judgment, one-dimensionally based hate, which it's so funny and so ironic that most of the anti-hate people are some of the most hateful fucking people I've ever interacted with,
It-
you know?
Hypocritical truth.
Yeah, it's just incredible. It's like, so I'm with you on racism. We should never judge someone based on one dimension of their dynamic. So how much melanin they have on their skin. Absolutely, 100% agree. But then you want to judge somebody on a tweet they made fucking 15 years ago. Isn't that the same pathology as racism? Like you're taking one tiny dynamic of a complex human being and judging their entire character for it. It's beyond me that people can't see the irony in it, and moreover, to use your word, the hypocrisy in it.
There's so much to unpack in the conversation, and you and I will never solve it. And I don't think it can be solved by any amount of vodka you and I would drink, over, just hanging out with the boys or having a giant conversation with some of the most brilliant minds in the world. There is an issue in the world, in every country and in every area. But what I've learned and what Cecilia and I've talked about on a regular basis is standing in integrity. Are you a good person to your core? And do you support, nurture, love, and encourage others? If you do that, and if cancel culture comes at you for something, you can honestly apologize and say, I didn't know, but thank you for clearing it up, and just watch me and how much better I'm going to be because now I know. Or you can stand in integrity, say, hold it, don't come at me. I know deep down inside I am a good person, and whatever it is you are trying to dig up on me or say about me is just not true. And I'm kindly asking you to go away. But if this actually rises up, I can stand in integrity and assemble my own army of people who believe in me to now stand up and resist you, not crush you, but defend you and defend this on what's going on. So if you stand in integrity and live in integrity, you know without question that you are doing what's right by you, and then you can't be faulted for it. So there's a big difference between the narcissistic personality disorder that some people can have that feel they're doing the right thing, and everybody around you in the world knows that this is bad and you are awful. But if you're not that person, then you can stand in integrity and actually go to sleep good at night, knowing that at least you're doing your best and at least you're open and you're willing to learn and do
Yes.
better.
Don't
We're
just
not.
be a virtuous good person on social media. Live your life that way. Like be a good person in real life because that's what actually matters. It's these day-to-day interactions. And I've had these discussions with lots of people. I don't think we can legislate love. I don't think we can top down get rid of pathological ideals or pathological corrupted ideals like racism. It's a human problem. We need to get to know each other. We need to educate each other through experience and friendships and relationships. And then all that shit just goes away because we start to realize that we can, to bounce back to the conversation about you and Dallas, that we can find things about people, even if we differ ideologically from them, things about them that we respect or we admire,
Yeah.
or we go, hey, listen, like there's these 6 things that you and I don't align on, but there's these 12 things that we do. And if we start there, maybe we can build a bridge to get somewhere.
Exactly. So as you circle back to that, or you circle to other country music feuds that have happened that I believe have been rectified to a degree. I don't know, like Zach Brown and Luke
Luke
Bryan
Bryan.
with what happened on JRFM in Vancouver. That to me is just something that blew up, and now obviously it's done. Whether they're buddies and they're going to do a duet on their next single, I don't know, and it doesn't matter. So all there's so much
They
room in the
both seem to be doing fine.
exactly. There's so much room in the sandbox for Dallas Smith and his incredible band and his outstanding crew and his incredible fan base. Same thing like there is for me. Same thing like there is for Dean Brody, Tim Hicks, High Valley, Megan Patrick, Jess Moskaluk, Tennille Towns, Mackenzie Porter. There's room for us all. So that's all I can really say on that matter is that it just only blew up because I think our industry is so small, and we both have
And we're
names.
gossipy
It
fucks. Like our industry is full of gossipy fucks. Like it just
still there on
is.
Google. Google
Yeah.
Brett Kissel, and it'll go Brett Kissel wife, Brett Kissel kids, Brett Kissel Dallas Smith. Like it's still there. So whatever.
Yeah. I think it's something that's got to be addressed. And I'm glad you did. Let's talk about another social media landmine, but let's talk about the blessings that came out of it. And that's COVID. Um, Obviously, it has had a absolutely brutal impact on the live touring industry, but you've done some good shit during the COVID shutdown. Creatively, you've really flourished. You've launched a vodka company, which we're going to give Deuce Vodka a nice little plug because that's what we do, and you've had a lot of time to really enjoy your family and bond with them. So, talk a little bit about all the positive things that have come out of this COVID shutdown for you.
Well, of course, there's silver linings. If you choose to look for silver linings, you're going to find them. And I'm really grateful that I've been given the gift of time with my family, time with my grandparents, time to record my most important record of my life and write songs with true intention. Those are gifts that I choose to I choose to cling to, but there's still a lot of frustration with what's going on in the world and the hypocrisy that's going on in the world and the ups and the downs and the separation that COVID-19 has caused our world. And even in my group of friends or family, it is very, very frustrating, which again, to a degree, I just put the blinders on, I stay in my lane, I do what I need to do, and I just focus on what I can control because there are a lot of things at a government level, at a national level that are so out of control and beyond my control that they ain't going to get fixed. So standing up sometimes and really pounding my fist on the table and saying, this is what I believe. This is what's really going on. I'm going to alienate 50% or more of the people. So screw it. I'll keep writing country songs and I'll enjoy this gift that I've been given, my time with my family.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. It's the same way I feel. Um, I think you and I are pretty aligned on a lot of the policies around COVID, which is that, I certainly understand that this is a real thing. I am not one of those people who thinks this is a conspiracy. it is, it's a very dangerous virus for uh, a cross section of the population who has underlying comorbidities. And I believe, I used this analogy the other day talking to a friend of mine. I said, listen, if somebody released a crocodile in your neighborhood and the rule was you couldn't kill the crocodile, you would have a couple of choices. You could stay in your house, lock down, lock your doors, close your windows, never leave your house, and you would be safe from that crocodile. Or you could come up with plans to navigate around this thing. And I think that's what's being lost right now. It's like, how do we navigate around COVID? How do we navigate around some of these new variants? And if the variants are going to vary to the degree that we may not be able to anticipate vaccines for them, well, then we got a real problem on our hands, and we have to figure out what we're going to do, because rolling lockdowns just aren't a permanent solution. I know that's controversial, but it shouldn't be. We can't just continue to shut down aspects of the economy out of fear. We should be pouring more resources into protecting the most vulnerable people, but figure out how we modify our lives to safely integrate this virus into it now, as safely as we can, obviously, so that we can move forward and have a life. I got no problem with somebody who wants to sit at home. And I'm not trying to make fun of people, but like, you want to sit home and wear 3 masks and sit in your basement, I don't have a problem with that. That's your life. Don't ask me to do it. That's all I'm saying. And I wish policymakers could understand the unintended consequences and the long-term implications of some of these policies that they're enacting out of fear. And I wish there were more of a proactive approach of, okay, there's new strains, there's new variations of COVID. Obviously, this thing isn't just going to go away. So how do we navigate around these things? And how do we build out a new economy and a new world where we protect the most vulnerable and we allow the rest of the people who either have had it and kicked it or have the vaccine or aren't afraid of it to just move on with their lives?
I'm hoping that people get an opportunity and have taken the opportunity over the last year to open their eyes and do a lot of research on both sides of the coin, about the seriousness of the virus and also the seriousness of the repercussions of lockdowns. And if they get an opportunity, then they can have an informed decision. One of the challenges with mainstream media is that whoever controls the narrative controls the people. So whatever it is that we are seeing, hearing, or is presented to us on social media is what is believed. But sometimes it's not fully accurate. So, what I mean by what I'm saying is there's an opportunity for further research, there's an opportunity for common sense to combat some of the things that are going on in the world right now. We were living a very comfortable life as Canadians. With comfort comes complacency. Now, with complacency comes compliance. So we are just following the rules so we can get back to normal, when some of the rules that are put in place are very hypocritical and kind of don't make sense if you just do 1 ounce of thought process. I sit at a table at a restaurant, but I stand up now. As I stand up, I put my mask on. I just want to know what the difference is. I just want to know. I know that there are a bunch of, again,
And you shouldn't be labeled a conspiracy theorist just for asking questions. We want to, I know with my kids, I've always said to you, listen, I want you to be a critical thinker. If I have a policy around the house that you want to challenge, get your case in order and present it to me, because maybe you'll change my mind. Right. And I think we are, we're forcing compliance through shame, and any movement that does that is just never going to get me on board. Anyway, sorry, continue your point. I sort of interrupted you there.
There are a lot of things, Jim, you and I are aligned on, and we have this conversation on a regular basis. That fear is something that human nature, we are driven towards, and it certainly controls us. It always has. It always has, and it always will to a degree. But if there are certain elements that just don't make you afraid anymore, then you can't be controlled by that fear. So, what I'm trying to say is this: I don't want to be reckless, but I live my life and I let common sense guide my decisions, as opposed to just because there's a sign or something tells me on the radio station doesn't mean I have to do it. Now, there are
Right.
a lot of reckless people out there, but there are a lot of people living in fear. I know where I stand, and often that's really just a private choice and a private matter. But there are a lot of policies in government that just don't make sense to me and really frustrate me. And the more that I dig and the more conversations I have with members of the RCMP, with other doctors, other people in power, they're afraid to stand up for something that they believe is actually causing more harm than the virus is. They're afraid to stand up for fear of losing their job, losing their status, losing their pension, and therefore they comply. And by complying, it actually sends the wrong message. So there are a couple of things that need to be addressed, but me, a country singer, I don't know if I'm the guy to address them. So sometimes it's good to put the blinders on, but sometimes by staying neutral, I'm part of the problem too. So I have a real internal struggle every single day to know that, hmm, maybe, just maybe, this one thing I did this one time, I actually think, based on the rules, is illegal. But what I'm doing is just not wrong. It's not wrong. How
Mhm.
can what I'm doing right now be wrong? So it's just a real internal struggle where I just let common sense be my guide with my decisions, and I take it from there. And I sometimes have to roll the dice, knowing that I might be traveling out with a musician, riding in my vehicle to go to a location, but that musician friend of mine actually blew a tire, so they have to travel with me. But technically, under the rules, that's illegal. Well, then why is that a problem? Why is that a rule in the first place? I do like to challenge the rules when common sense doesn't make sense.
Well, yeah, when common sense goes against the rules, I think it'd be interesting as a case study, and we'll probably do this in 20 to 50 years looking back, as to whether or not COVID would have been what it was and policies would have been shaped had there not been social media. You know, when you think back to SARS in 2005, we had, or it was earlier than that, early 2000s.
But
I can't remember the exact year, but we had a fucking concert with 70,000 people in downtown Toronto to raise money for people who had been displaced, or their family members had been lost to SARS. Like, we handled things differently before we had this preponderance of opinion on social media. The mask mandate's an interesting one because I always put on a mask when I go into a public place. I don't see it as an infringement on my rights any more than I have to wear a shirt. You know how much I don't like wearing shirts, but
yeah,
how much I'll wear a mask to go into a restaurant or a store because I don't want to break the balls of that business owner, and I don't want to cause that person any problems. They probably have had enough. They don't need me complaining about my perceived rights. I will not wear a mask if I'm running in the hills, for example. I'm not going to put a mask on and fucking take a picture and show everyone what an obedient servant I am to the government. Uh, in situations that don't call for it. If I'm in a room alone, like I'm not wearing a mask to show the rest of the world what level of compliance I have, but I will do it in social situations where I feel like it might make people uncomfortable, or like I said, I don't want to cause any static for any business owners because they've had it tough enough. And it's such a weird thing. And I've had this conversation again privately with people who completely present the uh, I want to be a good government obedient servant on social media, but privately they're like, yeah, man, like I've had people over to the house for dinner and not worn a mask. And I'm like, Well, maybe you need to talk about that. Like, maybe you need to actually, like, show people that you're willing to break the rules because the version of yourself that you're putting out on social media is just propagating this idea that we just need to comply and we can't ask questions. And did you ever watch the documentary or read the book Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky?
No, sounds interesting. I can't wait to see it though.
Well, the documentary is on. You can buy it on Apple TV.
Okay.
Uh, there's also a book which preceded the documentary. But Noam Chomsky is a well respected political analyst and a modern day philosopher. He's a brilliant man. He's still with us, thank God. Um, he has talked about how the media has helped shape um, American apathy and patriotism, and I say that with air quotations, as it pertains to foreign policy. They don't talk about it in the documentary because it was produced prior to Iraq, the Iraq invasion in the early 2000s under the Bush government, weapons of mass destruction being the premise for that. But basically, the media was complicit in whipping up this narrative that Saddam Hussein was worse than Hitler, that he had gassed his own people, and to some degree, there was some truth. He wasn't a good guy by any means. I'm not defending Saddam Hussein, but that basically they needed to get the American public on board to um, justify the invasion of Iraq. And the way they did that was through getting the media on board first. And if you don't think that at times the media, the mainstream media is being called upon to help strengthen movements that shape policy and force people in line, then you're crazy. I urge people, go out, read a book like that. I'm reading a really great book right now by Matt Taibbi, who's one of my favorite Rolling Stone reporters of all time. Brilliant guy. It's called Hate Inc. And it talks about this binary team versus team mentality that we have in politics, and how social media has just been like adding gas to the fire.
Oh
And
yeah.
and listen, I'm not saying you should wear a tinfoil hat and be a crazy person. But what I am saying is sometimes you got to question what you're being told, and it's okay to do that. And it doesn't make you. It doesn't. It shouldn't. We shouldn't be shaming people to get them to fall in line on policies. What we should be doing is explaining to them the validity of those policies and why, if they want to protect themselves and their neighbors and the people they love, they should adhere to them. You explain that to me, you'll get me on board. But if you try to force or shame me into it, I'm going to have questions, right?
If you need force, if you need shame, and if you need fear to get your point across, then your point is not that sound to begin with. So fear is the real virus that I've seen here. And I can speak from a place of everybody in my family has gotten COVID-19. Not me, not Cecilia, but every relative as far down the list as you can find. Now, there are elements of it that are very serious. We look at what we were talking about on our conference call the other day about the story, the young guy got it out of nowhere. There are so many elements of this disease that, or this virus, that are
Unpredictable.
very, very unpredictable and very, very sad. But one of the big systemic problems with COVID 19 that I'm finding is the separation that it's caused with those who don't want to wear a mask, those who maybe can't wear a mask because of legitimate medical exemptions, those who just see it as, I know what the percentages are, I'd like to roll the dice. But the fear is that if you don't wear a mask, you are harming me. If I wear a mask, I'm saving you. Now there's a big thing that came out in Quebec about a number of masks that are deemed unsafe. A lot of big things that the population of nurses and doctors are talking about, wearing a mask twice is not good. Everyone hangs it on their rearview mirror or keeps it in their console, puts it on to go in and to follow the rules, yet you're not supposed to wear a mask twice. All of these rules are going all around. You don't know what to say, what to believe, but the minute you and I have this conversation, you and I are the bad guys. The minute we don't go along with the narrative, we're the bad guys. The minute you question, we are the bad guys. And all we're doing is having a conversation. And in certain circles of friends that I've got, we just simply don't wear masks. In certain situations, they have explained, I want this mask to be worn, etc., 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 etc. So I'm going to wear it. Go ahead. No problem. But the separation that COVID-19 has caused is the biggest problem as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of the things that I'm seeing now with a bunch of little kids and little kids in my family and little kids in my circle, of that there is the virus lurking around every corner, the way it's portrayed on TV. Nobody likes a house party or a play date like COVID-19. So what is it telling our kids? That playing is bad. Playing could make you sick. To a degree, it always has. If you've got the sniffles, if you've got a cold, mom and dad, please don't bring your kid over to my house. Now, we hope that this is going to be over very, very soon. We're into this thing for a year. But what's it going to mean for the future of schools and bubbles and all these partitions that are going on right now in the classrooms? It's just not the same world it used to be. I'm very frustrated by it all. And sometimes I don't know what to think, Jim. I really don't. So again, I retreat to the farm. I just put a guitar on my lap. I just cling tight to my wife and my kids. I come out here. I grow my own garden. And literally sometimes have been my two favorite words this year. Fuck it. Fuck it. You know what? That's going on. Oh, really? Is that what they're saying in the news? Fuck it. I just, I'm going to do my thing. And maybe my job this year, over the last 2 years, has just been to be a beacon of light, and maybe just not even share my opinion, because by even sharing the things that I've shared, the fact that I'm thinking critically or maybe trying to challenge the narrative with common sense, people are going to hate me for it. But you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to write my music, sing my songs, and do my thing. And the more this boils up, and if this whole thing gets actually really, really bad, everybody's going to have to choose a side. If it comes down to it, you're going to have to choose a side. You're going to have to choose a side.
Right.
But I don't know if we're there just yet. And I'm just hoping that the province of Alberta can open up, BC can open up, Canada can open up, and we just get on with it.
Well,
On
eventually we're going to have to, to some degree. And like I say, that's not going to come without modifications, and I'm fine with that. But we have to continue on with our lives, And I think one thing, and I do want to talk about Deuce Vodka. That's going to be our next subject. But just to bounce back to this, one thing that I don't think people realize is that there's such a sacrificial element for celebrities to take a stance. I think about Muhammad Ali and how he stood up against the purveyors of the Vietnam War, and how that him taking a strong stand against refusing to go halfway around the world to kill brown people for a war he didn't believe in and a cause he didn't champion. That cost him 3 years of the prime of his fucking career. Now, Muhammad Ali will always be the greatest, but what could he have been had he had those 3 years in his prime back? And now, again, people don't understand. Like, if you're a celebrity and you stick your neck out, especially if it doesn't conform. And by the way, at the time, Muhammad Ali was hated by the American public for his stance on the Vietnam War. So for all you people out there who like to think Muhammad Ali is a great guy, he was a great guy and he was a strong man. But if you were living in the 1960s, you probably, statistically speaking, would have been on the side of the media and the government going, he's a bad guy, because statistically, that's the truth. There's a real sacrificial element to artists, celebrities sticking their neck out, So, hopefully it doesn't come to that for people like you or people who think like you, but to pretend that there aren't a lot of there isn't a potentially a big downside to coming out and saying what sometimes needs to be said is just a lie. And people often look to celebrities and it's like, well, you should have an opinion on this or you should say something on that. And it's like, you have no idea how much that individual might lose by expressing that opinion. And
It
anyway,
comes to
it's
this: are you a good person at your core? If you believe in everything that if you believe in this one particular thing, this is hypothetical, but I don't. Does that mean I should hate you? Does that mean that you're clearly a bad person and that's it? I'm never going to listen to your records again? Or if I believe in this, that's who I am. Look at how much hate Katie Lang, the Albertan, got by saying, I am a vegetarian. I am a vegan. I grew up in Alberta and I don't believe in Alberta beef anymore. Just let her be, man. Just let her do and eat what she wants to eat and let her sing her songs. But yet,
Yeah, I'm
everybody,
glad you brought that
that,
up. I grew up in a
that's the
cattle
reason why
ranching
I'm against.
family,
Yeah.
and to the credit of my parents at the time, whose literally their life depended on people consuming beef, they were like, she should fucking say whatever she wants to say. Like if that's her opinion, that's fine. It doesn't
Yeah.
affect me, and it's not going to change someone's mind who loves eating hamburgers and steak. Like they're still going to do what they do. Like and I commend them for that in hindsight because I go, they were open-minded enough to go, yeah, meat's not for everybody. And if she wants to espouse the benefits of being a vegan or a vegetarian, like go for it, you know?
Yeah,
And
it happens, especially out west, a great deal with oil. I come from an oil family. We've been pulling oil out of the ground since the 1900s, and here's the reality: is that Jane Fonda and Bob Barker and Leonardo DiCaprio will come up to Fort McMurray and just do a big press conference about how bad oil is. You know what? I wish you didn't, but go ahead. No problem. I'm still going to go to the very next Leonardo DiCaprio movie because I can't wait to see it. Still going to watch Jane Fonda on Grace and Frankie, and I'm going to enjoy it for what it's worth. And I still miss Bob Barker on The Price is Right today. That's my perspective, and that just goes to show that you can disagree with their opinion, but still appreciate what they offer to the world. So a bunch of people in the oil business need to understand that, hey, it is what it is. It actually doesn't affect your oil prices just because Leonardo DiCaprio showed up and said, hey, a bunch of ducks died in this pond because of an oil spill. That's really sad, but I mean, do better, move on.
yeah,
Like
people neglect to say that he did take a private jet when he went in for those press conferences. Like that's
or
the other thing that's so like, uh,
yeah,
come on, like if you're going to set an example, then you better set an example, live by it because the carbon footprint of most of the people who are anti-oil is a lot higher than the rest of us. But please continue.
and that's why there's so much hypocrisy going on, and that's why for me at 30 years old, I don't have it figured out, Jim. I'm just trying to do my best to do my best, but I'm noticing now more and more and more and more is that there are a lot of problems in the world that you just can never solve. You just can't solve it. You can't
No.
solve it. You can do the best that you can, and it's my job to raise good kids. I just came into this old Chevy right now so that you wouldn't hear the heater blasting. But I just want to raise a good generation of kids. I want to do the best that I can with my three little kids and just have the world be better, for the next 20 years than it was the last 20 years. If I can do that with my music, I'm going to do it and try not to cause too much controversy while doing so. But hey, if I am asked and it's actually done, gun to my head, knife to my throat, where do you stand on a certain issue? Of course, I'll say it, but I'm not there yet.
And there's something to be said for the reality that maybe the best way to influence people is through your art. I think that I think that artists aligning themselves with activism at times is fine. Like I think absolutely they have a right to do it. The Dixie Chicks had a right to say what they said about George Bush. I don't think they should have been dropped from radio. I thought that was fucked up when that happened. I thought when Sinead O'Connor came out, against Catholicism at the time, and she was attacked for that, that was fucked up because she has a right to feel, and some real justification backstopping her perspectives on that issue. But great art changes perspectives, and it touches the emotion and the feeling brain more than it does the thinking brain, and it can be a very effective mechanism to getting people to change their perspectives. And I think a lot of artists who get swept up in the activism component of their existence forget how much good they could do if they wrote the right song about the subject they're so passionate about. So I urge you to stay on that train, my friend. You're doing a
Well,
great
look,
job with it.
and thank you, Jim. But look at Make a Life Not a Living. That is the most true song I could have ever recorded for the way that I feel and the things that I want to do in my life, the way I want to spend my time, and what I want to say. Make a Life Not a Living. You go line by line, lyric by lyric on that song. Without question, that is me to a T. So I am actively promoting that lifestyle, that mindset. And I believe that those who choose to follow me down that path and those who choose to live that way, that can be a very good way to brighten your spirit and change your whole entire outlook and perspective on life if you choose to think about things in the way that that song preaches. So I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I'm telling you that's who I am and that's what I'm choosing to do. And I'm very grateful for that. So
You're going
there
to
could
inspire
act
a lot of people to embrace that perspective in their life with that song.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Much more than you would if you preached to them uh, atop your Instagram page, right?
Yeah.
About what's important in life. You can say it through a song and you can say it so much more effectively. Deuce Vodka. So, in the middle of a pandemic, you launched a new company. It's a company that had been around for a while, but you came on as a partner, and you guys are having incredible success in the realms of distribution. Um, Obviously, I've seen this thing grow from inception of when you got involved, and it's grown exponentially. What was it that inspired you to want to get into the liquor business?
There are a couple things, but most importantly, I like to drink, just plain and simple. I grew up in a family where drinking socially was just a big part of our culture and a big part of who we are. After a long day's work, a hard day's work, there'd be a bottle in the center of the kitchen table. We'd crack open a couple cold beers, and Grandpa would have a shot, especially because he's Eastern European, Ukrainian, Polish roots. So vodka was a big cultural part of how I grew up. So getting into the vodka business made sense because it was a spirit that we consumed on a regular basis. But also, I loved the entrepreneurial path that I could walk down with this new company and selling this product the same way I was selling music and taking on my experiences and bringing them to the forefront to now bring this product from inception in Alberta to over 800 stores, to almost 1,000 stores, to now doing our goals. What we wanted to do by the end of the year, we did in the first week of March. So we are just crushing our goals day after day, week after week, and coming up with new products and new areas to distribute to go to every province now. We want this to be a much loved product and spirit across Canada, and we don't see why it can't be us. Why does Smirnoff need to have all the fun when Deuce Vodka can have some fun in the sandbox?
Were you inspired by some of the other celebrities, like The Rock with his tequila brand? Uh, did some of that have a bit of a like, oh yeah, this is something I could do too?
There were very few artists that would do something in their prime. More and more are doing it now. But George Strait, as he is truly a legend, he's got Código tequila. Um, George Clooney, it's hard to say when if he's in his prime or if he's not in his prime. He's still a much beloved actor. but Casamigos tequila. Ryan Reynolds was a guy in his prime with Aviation Gin. I am not at that level of George Strait, George Clooney, The Rock, or Ryan Reynolds. Hey, let's not mistake that. But as a local guy, as somebody who I feel is very normal, this is a very elite tequila, an elite vodka for a very normal, affordable price. And that is something I stand beside and I stand behind. So I love this product. I'm really grateful that so many people do love it as much as I do. And it's very cool to have conversations with you and other interviewers that have now put me in the realm of George Strait, Ryan Reynolds, um, I don't know, and the list goes on.
You got to do a
Nelly,
few more push-ups to get to the Rock, but
uh,
you're in the same realm as far as representing another alcohol brand.
I
So,
I could do a million push-ups, and I don't think I'm gonna become quite what The Rock is. But I am inspired by his drive, and now
yes.
being able to diversify my business and have something, have another thing that I can be really proud of in creating legacy, or a company that I can leave for my kids, um, and a company that can do a lot of good too. We know a lot of people like to have a cocktail at the end of the day the same way that I do, so we're giving them a really great option.
And I think it's brilliant to diversify, especially when you have the marketplace awareness and leverage that you do. Is there a part of you that is concerned as you get busier and busier with Deuce Vodka that it may not complement but be a distraction to your main focus, which is your art? Is that ever a concern for you?
Oh, for sure. Everything can be a distraction, but it's all in how you look at it and all in how you manage it. I mean, there was a time when my management had a very frank conversation about getting married so early, and could that be a distraction? Well, we've been able to turn that around, and as I said earlier in the podcast, Cecilia is the single greatest driving force to my success. Kids are the ultimate distraction. They distract from everything, but they're also the best little heartbeats that put things into perspective. And I've been able to use my kids in this way. Because of them, I work harder. And I feel that I've written, recorded, and done my best work because I've got three mouths to feed, and I've got three little people that I want to make proud. So
No, you're
I,
right on. I mean,
I manage.
I think people really underestimate the motivational power of responsibility and accountability. And sometimes the more you have going on in your life, the more well, often the more you have to live for, especially as it pertains to kids, man. It's like that just changes your life. And yes, it's a lot of work. And yes, it's a massive obligation, but that's where the magic in life actually is. Most people want to, as they ascend in their life, they fall into this idea that they want to abdicate more responsibility. They want less accountability. And it's like, no, man, what you want is more accountability. What you want is more responsibility because that gives you purpose, that gives you motivation, that gives you drive. And I'm so glad you've identified that. And I don't worry at all. I think you are going to put the right people in place to manage the aspects of the vodka company that you need to. You've got a great partnership there with Kelsey and with Matt. But also, I think it complements your brand. I think it elevates it, so I think it's a positive.
I do too. I see it for sure as a positive, um, from the aspect of branding, the aspect of perception, the aspect of finances. And I'm really proud of this company. And I love that I'm able to go to work for this company, and that again, I was given the gift of time so we can launch this properly and launch this successfully. So, because of that, I believe that once it gets to a certain point, that is just um, a wheel that is going to keep spinning. Whereas I can now shift my focus back to country music because, well, the world is back to normal. I can go back and I can tour again. And how great would it be if my own company sponsored my own tour? How great would it be if we can work on relationships and have a great conversation with the buyers in the arenas and get my own product on the well for the Caesars or the vodka Cokes that people are going to drink in Medicine Hat or Moose Jaw or London or Halifax. That's my brain goes there. And I love looking up to and reading the stories about Dolly Parton and how she created Dolly World, or Dollywood, I meant, looking at Garth Brooks and the companies that he owns, looking at 50 Cent and how he owns vitamin water, looking at Mark Wahlberg and how so many dealerships in California he owns. So yeah, why not be like those guys? I want to be the Alberta version of that. So why not me?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think in the early phases of your career, you want to focus. You want to focus entirely on the career. You want to build that equity. You want to build that value. And then at some point, it is just brilliant to diversify because you have the leverage, you have the marketplace awareness, and you've got hundreds of thousands of people who follow you on various platforms through your social media who now you can distribute and advertise and promote your product to too. So why not? I think it's one of the best things that's come out of social media in terms of how it interfaces with celebrity value. It's like now you can take a celebrity and it's not just the music you put out in the concert tours. Of course, that's a huge aspect of your business, but you can parlay that into other industries. And so I commend you on that, my friend. Great job on this.
Thank you. And for a lot of young artists out there, the power of social media can still be very positive. We talked a lot today about how separating it can be, but it was originally intended to connect people. And so if you hold that focus on connecting and not always promoting yourself or a product, but using your channel and using your platform to connect, tell great stories, or what you can do is you can use the attention in which you have by your 2,000 followers, your 20,000 followers, or your 120,000 followers. You can use that attention and you can do a good thing by promoting products for other people, which can help your bottom line in terms of sponsorship and investment capital for the next project that you need. So doing those kinds of things and thinking outside the box to use social media as an advantage is a very, very unique perspective for a lot of young artists to hold. I'm just at the point right now that I don't mind. I actually enjoy promoting other products, again, standing in integrity that I enjoy. But I think it's a little bit cooler now that I've got my very own product that I can promote on my own channel. The same way Ryan Reynolds was talking about aviation gin for a solid 2 years until he sold it for $610 million.
Very exciting times ahead for you, my friend, personally, professionally. And I just want to thank you so much for taking this time to chat. You have officially become my longest podcast interview of all time, surpassing Frank Stallone. Well done. And I knew that if we got into a podcast and talked about everything that we talk about on regular conversations, it would go on forever and it would be great. And I'm really glad you took the time to do this today. Thank you.
Jim, thank you for saying that, but I got to thank you. There's no denying I knew deep down that this was going to be at least an hour and a half to 2 hours because we have so many things to talk about and we're so aligned and we formed such a great true friendship, a lifelong friendship, over the years. So I love you. I respect you. I'm very excited that we got to cover so many topics. And I just hope everybody enjoyed this conversation the same way that I enjoyed this conversation with you too. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Please give Cece a big hug and hug those beautiful babies of yours for me. And hopefully sooner than later, we'll see each other in the flesh.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'm going to get back out and, well, as you know, I'm doing some recording with the band in the barn. So I think it'll be very, very fun whenever anybody sees this product. I was happy to actually skip sound check and talk business and music with you. So thank you for this distraction. I will hug Cece and the kids when I see them, but I'm going to get back to work in the barn.
Thanks, brother.